And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to an unplanned, unexpected Memorial Day weekend Saturday edition of the Lowe Post podcast, because when Luka Doncic hits that shot in that moment and glares at Rudy Gobert with a level of anger and contempt that I was like startled by. I mean, if you freeze frame Luka's face when he's saying, MFer, you can't effing guard me, whether he was speaking English or Slovenian, as he jokingly claimed to our Tim McMahon after the game, the level of just rage and disrespect for Rudy Gobert's defense on that switch was just screaming through the screens. And Tim Bontemps, there have been a lot of big shots in these playoffs from a lot of great players. Jaylen Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo, Andrew Nebhardt's three to save the Pacers season, on and on. I don't think there's been a shot as consequential as that shot against that defense in this game, in that arena, in this series, to go up 2-0. And I'll save this for later, but we are staring potentially at a Boston-Dallas finals that would be absolutely juicy. Minnesota won 3 games in Denver, so I'm not counting them out. They look a little punch drunk in this series. But let's first of all, thank you for joining. You are in Indianapolis and you're getting up early with us today. Thanks for joining.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Second of all, let's just start at the end.
Seems like a good place to start.
Minnesota's up 108-103 with about a minute 30 left after Kyrie Irving misses 2 free throws that will be forgotten to history. Beats Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert, I thought they blitzed and were a little higher with Rudy Gobert the whole game, and I thought the higher he came out, the more unsteady he looked, and Kyrie just got around him, drew a foul, did not like Rudy's defense on blitzes individually in the game, but missed both free throws. And then the Wolves don't score again, and the Mavs go on a 6-0 run to finish the game. Where would you why don't we start at the Luka shot? You're watching that in real time like I am on television or on your laptop or whatever. You see who's in the game and you see who's out of the game. The lineup the Wolves have on the floor is Ant, McDaniels, Slow-Mo, Naz Reid, and Rudy Gobert. On the bench are Alexander Walker, Conley, and Cat out of their core rotation. If you want to go switch everything, I think the only guy out of those 3 that's on the bench that should be in the game is Alexander Walker. You could maybe Conley, who is feisty but undersized. Cat in space has been kind of a train wreck for a lot of the series. 2 games. You can't quibble that much with the lineup choice. The strategic choice to switch is another matter. You're watching that unfold. What are you thinking? Are you envisioning dread for Rudy Gobert as soon as the switch takes place?
I mean, he'd done a pretty good job guarding Luka in a similar situation not long before. And I thought, if anything, they would have tried to double Luka and have him get off the ball, because that had been what they've been doing a lot in the fourth quarter, including on the play that I think it was either PJ Washington or Kyrie hit the 3 to make it 108-106 a little bit earlier, where they double teamed and made him get off the ball, made somebody else hit a shot. I sort of thought that was what they would wind up doing. And they didn't wind up doing that, and they ended up doing a pretty soft switch to get Rudy onto Luka, and then Jaden McDaniels could have also come over and switched him out and didn't early on. I mean, people love to bag on Rudy. I thought it was okay defense, particularly in that spot, and I think, frankly, sometimes he gets he gets put in a worse spot because he can actually stay in those switches better than just about anybody who's been his size ever in the history of basketball. So when he does an okay job and then isn't able to stay with Luka for a 4th move, as opposed to getting burned on the first move, it sets him up to get clowned on by people who like to do that. But, I mean, there's certain tactical things you could say Minnesota could have done differently there. I would just say that Luka hit a pretty crazy shot, and yeah, maybe Rudy could have got into him a little more. They could have switched him out, or they could have doubled him, but ultimately great players make great plays. And that was when Luka let the shot go. I was like, oh man, is that going to really go in? And then it did.
I I wondered if they were going to double him after Rudy was switched onto him, send somebody else out there to just help Rudy. But to your point, I mean, look, people want to say that Rudy is bad on switches or bad in open space, and year after year, the numbers suggest otherwise. He was one of the best isolation defenders in the entire league this year, according to Second Spectrum. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but when I was making my Defensive Player of the Year choice on my fake ballot, I looked it up and it was like point 0.7 something points per possession allowed on ISOs. And guess what? Most of those ISOs are on switches against perimeter players. Now, there are perimeter players, and there's Luka Doncic, one of the best offensive players who has ever lived, who has made an art form out of footwork and deceleration, acceleration, deceleration, backpedaling. Like Gobert is going to have issues there, and he had issues there. And Luka just made a fantastic shot, not a difficult shot for him. I mean, a difficult shot, but not out of his normal wheelhouse. It wasn't like more heavily contested than any number of shots he takes in a game. And Rudy just fell too far behind the dribble action. There was too much space. Luka made a great shot. And that sneer will live on forever among the many great facial expressions that this game and the freeze frames of them produce, including Luka looking up at Devin Booker 2 seasons ago with the smirk on his face. But man, that sneer, Tim Bontemps, if somebody looked at me like that in real life, I would be like, the level of hatred in your face is actually alarming to me. Like, that was as mean and angry a face as I have ever seen. And yes, Luka is a killer and a competitor, but I think he clearly took, like you said, everybody clowns on Rudy Gobert. Tim McMahon wrote a whole story about how everyone in the league clowns on Rudy Gobert. He seemed to take special pleasure in embarrassing the big defensive player of the year on an island at the end of the game. That look, I mean, I was mesmerized. I watched it like 5 times again this morning, and I freezed it at different points. Like, where I kept freezing it. Where does he look angriest? Is it here? No, actually, he looks angry here. No, he's like baring his teeth here. It was just, what a moment.
I would say it was when he was saying you can't bleep and guard me. That would be where I would say he looked angriest. But yeah, I mean, look, when you make a shot like that, you're allowed to talk your talk, and he certainly talked his talk quite a bit to Rudy. And look, I mean, it's been a heck of a 4 games in a row for Dallas. I mean, they go 2-2 against Oklahoma City. Shea's great down the stretch in game 4 in Dallas, and Oklahoma City ties that series, and the Mavs have gone on to win 4 straight games, including 3 on the road, to close out the Thunder and put themselves obviously in primo position to advance to the NBA Finals. I mean, it's a pretty remarkable week for them, and I mean, it was certainly a remarkable moment last night. There's absolutely no question about that.
Really a remarkable turnaround for the Mavericks in season. I mean, look, I've gone over it over and over again. I thought the PJ Washington and Gafford trades would certainly help them this season. I was concerned, like everyone else, about the long-term potential fallout from them, but I was lukewarm on what it would do for them this season. I didn't slam the trades by any stretch. I was like, okay. Thought they could be a conference finals team. That was their ceiling. Thought most likely second round out, and they have demolished that ceiling. And game after game after game, they just prove this is a straight up elite team. Like they in one season transformed from a decent playoff team that even their own fans, like, you go back and I read Mavs Moneyball a lot for my go-to like Mavs day-to-day content if I miss a game or something. Mid-season, they're like, even after the trades, they're like, hey, this team makes sense. Don't think the ceiling's that high, but like makes sense, fun team. This is a straight up championship caliber team. They've proven over and over again. And if they draw Boston in the finals, they'll probably be underdogs because Boston's been the best team by the numbers all season. Boston has essentially received a bye all the way to the finals at this point with all the injuries. But I don't think Boston should be big favorites in that series. I think Dallas has proven they can go toe-to-toe with any team at any level. Now, they've got a long way to go to finish the job against a Minnesota team who won 3 games in Denver, who has proven resilient, who's going to win a game at some point with their defense, even against the Mavs team that doesn't take care of the ball, whose offense feels more sustainable and kind of known and steady than Minnesota's offense, possession to possession. To me, that's the biggest difference in the series so far. Is Dallas knows exactly what they're going to do on every possession, and is two elite all-time offensive players who can get it done on any possession against whatever scheme you throw at them. And Minnesota just feels a little scattershot and unsure of itself, which is what happens when your lead playmaker is 22 years old and still learning how to make those reads. I heard you and Tim McMahon talking about the state of Anthony Edwards playmaking on the Hoop Collective on Friday, and I thought you were spot on. Like, he's fine. Anthony Edwards is fine as a playmaker for a 22-year-old scoring star. He's a step behind, multiple steps behind the best elite playmakers in the league. He's a step behind where he probably needs to be ultimately to be the player he's going to become. And that's totally fine. That's totally expected. Here they are, even with that, still 4 games from the finals, still with the shot at this series. Tim Bontemps, I almost am afraid to say it out loud, but I'm just going to say it out loud. Are we emotionally prepared for the city of Boston against Kyrie Irving in the finals?
I mean, it's been funny. I have said for a while that the most juice going into the finals would be the Celtics and Mavs for that reason. And I've gotten some pushback that Minnesota, because of Anthony Edwards' ascension, would have more energy as a final series. I mean, I think that Kyrie versus the Celtics would have an awful lot of juice, and it would certainly be it'd certainly be a very interesting series. To your point, I mean, there'd be two pretty similarly built teams that would play similar ways, and we'll see if it gets there or not. But yeah, I think there would certainly be a lot of energy at TD Garden on June 6th for Game 1 of Celtics Mavs if we do wind up there in 12 days or so, depending on what happens over the next few games in these series.
Let's go blow by blow at the end. Kyrie misses 2 free throws. Ant makes 2 free throws. He did a good job putting his head down at the end of the game and getting to the line. And it's 108-103. Let's go from there. First possession you mentioned, Kyrie immediately makes up for missing the 2 free throws by hitting a corner 3. An open corner 3. You can say that that's a mistake by Minnesota to leave an all-time great shooter wide open in the corner. If you watch that play, Luka has Kyle Anderson on him, and he's going one-on-one from the top of the arc. And I think it's Ant, inches over off Kyrie on the right wing to show help. Luka does the smart thing, just makes the easy pass. That's Kyrie Irving, man. You take it and go. Kyrie hits the gap, goes diagonally into the paint. Help converges on him. He kicks to Derrick Jones Jr. in the corner. And that's where the Wolves make the fatal, tiny, little mistake that can undo an entire defense. Mike Conley is rotating back to Derrick Jones Jr. That's his guy. He's fine. Derrick Jones Jr. is going to have some space, but you live with that. Mike Conley's closeout is going to be fine. Kyle Anderson sees that and panics and rotates away from Luka Doncic, getting kind of halfway towards Derrick Jones Jr. Anthony Edwards sees that and says, oh crap, Luka's open. I got to rotate up to Luka. Meanwhile, Kyle Anderson rotates back to Luka. All of a sudden, there are 2 guys on Luka at the top of the arc. Confusion behind that. Kyrie gets open. Great shot. Makes it 108-106. Any thoughts on that? I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, that shot doesn't go in. We're not having this podcast this morning.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a massive swing, and you didn't. I mean, Kyrie also missed a free throw earlier in the fourth quarter. 3 missed free throws in the fourth for Kyrie. It looked like that was going to be the story, and then he hits that shot and gets them, right back in contact when it looked like things were in pretty deep trouble.
Next possession is the controversial one. Minnesota gets the ball, Ant runs a pick and roll, draws Lively on a switch, attacks him going right. Kyrie with an awesome aggressive stunt off Jaden McDaniels in the corner, gets Ant to pull up and hesitate, and then throw this little short pass to Jaden in a bad spot in the coffin corner. Kyrie runs back to Jaden McDaniels and quote unquote knocks the ball out of bounds off Jaden McDaniels. They review the play. The play shows that it's initially called Wolves ball. The play shows that it goes off McDaniels. What the play also shows, as they pointed out on television, is that Kyrie Irving clearly fouled Jaden McDaniels, causing the ball to go out of bounds off Jaden McDaniels. refs are not allowed to review an uncalled foul. Dallas ball. Thoughts on that play, both sort of what you saw from Minnesota's offense and, like what can we, I mean, I understand the frustration of Minnesota fans. You're up 2 and you should have the ball and you don't.
I just would like to get rid of replay. I'm tired of replays. I'm tired of replay reviews. I'm tired of the controversies around replays. I'm tired of the last 2-minute reports that do nothing but anger people later on. The just outcome there would have just been Minnesota to have the ball out of bounds. That's the way basketball has always sort of worked in that spot. That's what the referees tried to do. Obviously, they got the call right by the fact that it was very obviously off of Minnesota and it was Dallas ball. But I think that life would have been just fine if we had gone on from there with there being no review and the Wolves having the ball. And again, I would like to just see the replay center in Secaucus and the entire replay apparatus shot to the sun and be done with it at this point.
I like that. Let's put the replay center in a space module and shoot it at the sun. Nobody's going to be inside it. Like, we can take all the people out first.
Take all the good people at the replay center out of it. And it's not about the refs. Like, they made the right call. Obviously, basketball is a very difficult game. I would just say at this point, let's just live with mistakes, just like we live with mistakes when players miss shot or commit fouls or whatever, and life would be fine. But that's my take on all this at this point.
LeBron can hit the launch button when we do that. Okay,
yes.
So Dallas ball, and here's the possession you're mentioning where Luka runs a pick and roll with Lively. It's just another unbelievable game for Lively, by the way. Just one game after another, Derek Lively just is like, I'm here, I'm ready. Like, I'm a top tier starting center.
He's been
much
awesome.
off the bat.
He's been really awesome. And we talked about it the other day on the pod, but I mean, he's reminded me of a young Tyson Chandler. And if he just becomes Tyson Chandler, that is a unbelievable find for Dallas. And as much as I believe I properly ripped them for how embarrassing they were in tanking at the end of last season, if the result was them getting a young Tyson Chandler, they'll deal with the embarrassment and the fine and everything else, and they'll have an awesome player on their team with Luka for a long time.
I think this might sound a little much. I think Lively is already more skilled as a passer and a one dribble finisher as a rookie than Tyson Chandler ever was. Now, he's not as elite as peak Tyson Chandler at defense. Tyson Chandler was Defense Player of the Year candidate. Did he win Defense Player of the Year one year? He did, right?
Yes, he did. Yeah.
And one of the all-time great lob finishers. Lively's already great at that. But I think as a passer and a one-dribble skill guy, he's already better than Tyson Chandler ever was. And I love Tyson Chandler. Anyway, 30 seconds left. Luka pick and roll. Draws Gobert on a switch, just like he did at the end of the game. And Gobert kind of gets on his side and pushes him inside the arc. Luka gets inside him, has some momentum. In the dunker spot is Lively. Naz Reid's on Lively. Naz Reid steps up to cut off Luka, and it looks like the lob to Lively to tie the game might be there. Luka takes a step back 2 instead, probably because he's Luka, and he's like, I'm just going to take a step back 2. But also Gobert is darting from Luka to Lively to disrupt the lob, and maybe Luka sees that, misses it kind of badly. Wolves come back down the floor, and then here's the possession that they're going to regret and Anthony Edwards is going to regret if they lose this series for a long time. And another turnover, this one charged to Edwards with 12.8 seconds left. What stood out to you about that turnover where he runs a pick and roll with Gobert, the Mavs switch, he drives it right away. He drives Lively right away to his left and then kind of gets stuck and pivots around and throws the ball out of bounds thinking Naz Reid is there and Naz Reid isn't there.
Well, to go back briefly to the prior possession, I do think if you want to criticize Rudy for anything late in the game or on the very final possession, it's that he didn't do what he did on the second to last one and make sure that Luka got inside the arc and at least just tied the game on a shot rather than being able to sit there for the step back and potentially win the game in regulation. So if you do, my buddy Jay King, who I was watching the game with, that was the first thing he said. You can't give up a 3 in that spot, which is totally, I think, the most reasonable criticism of him if you want to make on the final play. But as far as Ant goes, he was awful down the stretch, and he had awful turnover after awful turnover. He got completely bailed out by another pass that he flung into the stands where they called a foul, where there wasn't, frankly, a lot of contact. It didn't look like a little bit earlier in this final 2-minute stretch. And, I mean, again, Ant's a fabulous player. He's had a fabulous playoffs. I voted him all NBA. He's a really, really good young player who's got an incredible future that is going to get a lot better at this stuff. And when he does, he's going to be as good as anybody. But the idea that he's as good as Jason Tatum or he's as good as Luka Doncic or as good as any Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or any of these other guys, like the last couple of minutes of this game shows where he pretty severely is still lacking. And that's in making these kind of plays. I was honestly looking at the box score after. I saw he only had a couple turnovers. It felt like he had 2 or 3 in the final.
Well, the McDaniels one is charged to McDaniels, not him. That's why I had the same thing today. I looked at the box score. I was like, how did he only have 2 turnovers? They had 2 turnovers in the last minute, but they charged the other one to McDaniels.
I mean, so I guess he did in the rest of the game, which is probably why Wolves fans are probably screaming at me right now saying, how dare you say this? But look, at the end of the game, he had a couple chances to make plays and was sailing the ball all over the place. And yeah, I mean, that was a horrible turnover. And the second the ball went out of bounds, you just were thinking, Luka and Kyrie have the ball. There's plenty of time left. This is a very uncomfortable spot for the home team. And it certainly turned out to be one.
Yeah, the dread on Minnesota's behalf kicked in. And when Luka was dribbling around against Rudy, I'm sitting there watching. I'm like, this thing's going in. Like, I know everybody says that after every big shot like that, or even shots that like I thought Naz Reid's 3 at the end of the game, which was
that one I thought was going in too. Yeah,
I thought it was in, and it was not in, and the Wolves lose. So on that Ant turnover, he's pivoting around. If you look around 15 seconds left, so about 2 seconds before throws the pass, he pivots and he looks to his right. And Jaden McDaniels is wide open in the right corner. No one is near him. His defender is in the paint. Now, his defender is PJ Washington, who's already getting ready to pivot back there because he sees that Ant has the pass to Jaden McDaniels. I'm not saying that it's like a no-brainer catch and shoot 3 for Jaden McDaniels. What I am saying is when you're in trouble like that and you see an easy escape pass, you just make it and trust your teammate to make the next play, whether it's him shooting a 3 or him just reset, kick back out to Ant for whatever's left on the shot clock. He looked at that pass and he didn't make it. I saw it in real time. It was even more stark on the replay. You just got to make that simple read. Now, okay, well, let's talk about the Minnesota offense. Ant was 5 of 17. Missed a lot.
32.9% over his last 5 playoff games, which is not great.
Missed a lot of shots at the rim. Thought he had kind of a rough whistle. A couple of them could have been fouls, but the whole game was called very physically. And it was in his head because he had a drive, I think in the fourth quarter even, where Luka was the last line of defense at the rim, and Ant kind of had to clear one way at him, and Luka's not like a leaper, and Ant lofted this layup way high off the glass as if it was Derek Lively there and missed it. So yeah. Ant 5 of 17, Cat 4 of 16. That's 9 of 33 for your 2 best offensive players. In the series, they are 21 of 69 combined. I don't know that's less than a third by my math. That's very bad.
Yeah, it's barely over 30%.
Ant on 2s for the series is 4 of 14. 4 of 14.
And that goes back to game 5 of the conference semifinals. Over those 5 games, he's shooting from the field 32.9%, and he's in the low to mid 30s from 2-point range. Like that's just not good enough.
Minnesota as a team is 43 of 94, 45.7% on 2s. At the rim, they are shooting 54%. Those are just horrible numbers, unthinkably bad numbers. A lot of it is great Mavs defense. The Wolves are out of rhythm on offense. And I thought last night they made a concerted decision to give more reps to Conley and even Slow-Mo and Alexander Walker in an effort to we just can't let them load up on Ant every single possession. We've got to get him chances to attack off a closeout. We've got to get other guys the ball a little bit. And they just couldn't find. I mean, Conley had a fantastic game, made a bunch of floaters, made a bunch of threes, but they just couldn't find the rhythm where you get both on the same possession, where you get one guy. Very rarely did you get one guy has the ball and is still actively involved. There was one possession at the end of the second quarter, about a minute left, which I think is very indicative of where the Wolves are as an offense right now. It's a Conley Gobert high pick and roll. Ant's in the right corner. Ant doesn't move from the right corner the entire possession. Not only that, Ant has his hands on his hips damn near the entire possession. He's totally uninvolved. He's probably exhausted. That's an exhausted pose. And he just stands there, hands on his hips. Conley kicks to McDaniels in the left corner. McDaniels tries to hit Gobert to turnover. And when Ant sees the turnover, he's got his hands on his hips and he's like, he just bows his head like, I got to get back on defense now. And kind of half runs back. And they just haven't been able to find the blend where they get everybody involved at once and get the defense scrambling up. I thought they tried a couple of things that they'll probably revisit in game 3. I thought early in the game in particular, Ant was very smart about, okay, it's a stop. I got Kyrie stuck on me. I'm going to run like hell in transition and go right at him. I think they should still find him in the half court with Kyrie on him and get him some touches at the nail and stuff like that. We could talk about some other tactics. But their offense just looks a little bit hazy right now. And part of it is that Ant's just having trouble at the rim. Part of it is that Towns has just had a miserable series so far. And by the way, in Ant's defense, you go back and watch some of his passes. There are some reads he doesn't make, some passes he doesn't make. There was one pick and roll against Lively on drop coverage where I thought he pulled up way too early. He could have kept going. He does that a couple times a game. That's fine. That happens. Alexander Walker missed 2 wide open threes off really nice Ant passes. Cat missed a wide open 3 early in the fourth quarter off a fantastic out of timeout. Actually, I think it was an out of timeout play. Maybe it wasn't. And diagonal pass from Ant on the right wing. McDaniels missed a wide open corner 3 late in the second quarter when Ant split a double team and threw an outstanding pass to the corner. Like, there are some advanced reads in there that he makes and his teammates just didn't pay him off.
Yeah, that's certainly true. But I ultimately think that while there is some of that, I mean, most of the story here is just that, like you said, Karl Towns has missed shots that he was making against Denver, and Anthony Edwards has not played to the level required for these guys to win these games. And they've still had chances to win both games. And when they're up in the fourth quarter in both games at home. So if he can summon a little bit more, which he certainly is capable of in Dallas, they could certainly win a game or two and get right back in the series. They saw this in the opposite order of operations in the conference semifinals against Denver. But look, I mean, I think the biggest difference between the Thunder series for Dallas and this one is that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one of the best pick and roll operators in the league, never turns the ball over, makes a ton of great plays. And for as great as Dallas's defense is, he was able to make a lot of plays in that series. And through the first 2 games of this series, like you said, Mike Conley has been great, but Anthony Edwards has had the ball a lot and has made a lot of mistakes and has missed a lot of shots. And, you know, that's the biggest reason why the Wolves are in a giant hole as they head to Dallas for game 3. And where things have to start getting better is he's just got to start playing better. He's got to make more shots. He's got to be more efficient at the rim, and he's got to make better reads in these situations. And he just can't be making the mistakes in particular he was making in the final couple minutes of the game. And
Cat for the series is 10 of 36.
It's not good enough.
That's like not bad enough. Like, it's worse than bad. If it were just regular bad, I mean, the total margin in this series is +4 Dallas. If it's just like regular bad, the Wolves might be up 2-0. And he missed good threes last night. Those will fall. When he attacks early in the post, he's had success. When he sits there and sizes up PJ Washington, he's getting horrible shots. Some of the misses were absolutely horrible. One thing I think the Wolves can do more is I don't think they're making Luka work enough on defense. And part of that is because he's on McDaniels, who's their weakest offensive player in their starting five, and they don't want to like overuse McDaniels. But just as an example and a way to get Cat going, I think it was the third quarter or fourth quarter. I can't remember when. They were in a Conley McDaniels pick and roll to hunt Luka to say, you're going to have to work. Like, we're making you work. You're defending better than you ever have in your career, although I thought his first half defense for the second straight game was pretty bad. Switch Luka onto Conley. Conley, because he's a genius player, is like, I'm not the guy to really torch Luka. Cat, you come up here. Let's run another pick and roll and see if they switch Luka onto you. And they do. And he dumps it to Cat, and Cat posts up Luka. They send help. And they get an open three by, I think, McDaniels off of a flare screen. It's like that could be a way to get Cat going. It could be a way to hurt Luka a little bit more. I just think they need to make Luka work a little bit more on defense, similarly to how the Mavs are going at Conley, I think, pretty aggressively. Both when Kyrie draws Conley, like when they can't get out of that cross match, Kyrie's going right at him, hit a three in his face, drew a foul on a jump shot. And they're also having Derrick Jones Jr., when Conley's on him, set all kinds of off-ball screens for Luka because they don't want to switch Conley onto Luka. Luka got a floater in the lane out of that. But yeah, I mean, Cat just the Cat roller coaster is just it's a thriller. It goes all kinds of directions. It might stop at the top of a loop for a little while and leave everyone hanging upside down. Like you just love little consistency out of this offense, but this has been the issue all year. Their offense has been wildly up and down and nets out at average, and it got off to a scorching start in the playoffs. And in this series, for all the attention on Minnesota's defense, should they blitz? Should they drop? They blitzed more in game two. Their defensive rating was worse in game two, playing more aggressive pick and roll defense by a little bit, not much, than it was in game one. Their offense has been the problem in this series.
Yeah, they're not losing games because of their defense. They didn't lose the game last night because of this Rudy Gobert defense on Luka Doncic. They lost the game because Cat and Ant weren't good enough. And the reason I picked Dallas to win the series was ultimately I thought it was going to be a very defense-heavy series between two excellent defensive teams. As you mentioned, full credit to Dallas for the way they remade their team into an elite defensive team midway through the season. And as a result, this was going to come down to, in my opinion, the stars on both sides. And I ultimately thought that Luka and Kyrie were more reliable and the better pairing offensively between them and Ant and Cat. And through two games, that has certainly been the case. The reason this series is 2-0 in favor of Dallas is Luka and Kyrie have been tremendous and Ant and Cat have been terrible. And that's it, the fact that the first two games went that way and it was a toss-up in both of them is, I think, a decent sign for Minnesota that if those guys play better, this can look a lot different. However, Dallas's role players have not really hit shots through the first two games. They're going to hit shots in theory in Minnesota. I thought it was a pretty huge problem for the Wolves that they won the 3-point line by 36 points in game one, even though that was sort of by design, and didn't win the game. Those are games that you really cannot lose in a close playoff series like this. So yeah, like sometimes the adjustment talk is pretty simple. And in this series, it's for Minnesota, whatever else you want to say, the play better adjustment is the main adjustment. And as this thing goes to Dallas, Anthony Edwards and Karl Towns have to play like they were in Denver. And if they do, this series can potentially flip around the other way. If they're anywhere near the level they were in the first two games, it's probably going to be over pretty fast.
It just can't be overstated what a brilliant offensive player Luka is. I had him second on my MVP ballot ahead of Shea. And I remember
you didn't have an MVP ballot.
My fake MVP ballot. I remember a few years ago on NBA, it might have been 3 years ago on NBA Today. 2 years ago, I don't know. We had the who would you start your franchise with, Luka or Giannis question. Classic TV, just let's get everybody in hot water. And I picked Luka. And Giannis, I think it was the year the Bucks won the title. So it didn't look great at the time. But my thought was he's just yes, Giannis is a way better defense. These are two of the 4 or 5 best players in the NBA. Who cares, right? Like, but I just thought Luka's creativity as a passer and a scorer with his size is the rarest thing in basketball. And you can because he's a good shooter, you can construct any kind of team around him. You're less sort of in jail with the kinds of players you can get versus Giannis. You have to be very careful about the number of non-shooters you have around him. And that's borne out in this run. Just like the way he just gets these guys in a blender. Like Kyle Anderson had a stretch guarding Luka in the second quarter where all they did possession after possession was set a pick at half court for Luka, knowing they're not going to blitz him at half court. They're not going to switch at half court. So he's going to have a runway to the defender that's helping. And he uses that runway to speed up, get Kyle Anderson chasing him from behind. And as soon as Kyle Anderson catches up, Luka slows down. Kyle Anderson flies by him, and Luka's getting a step back three or drawing a foul. He's just, the art of it is really special. What did you think about the Wolves before we go on to a quick Boston tangent? What did you think of the Wolves defense in game two? They clearly did blitz more, and they brought Rudy. Even the Rudy drops were a step or two higher. Do you think it made a difference? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Just you go.
Their defense was fine. I mean, you're going to give up some stuff to Luka and Kyrie. I think they were 9 for 18 from three in the game. Like, those guys are great players. They basically shut the water off on everybody else. They didn't lose because of their defense. Like, they got to have better, more efficient offense, and their 2-star offensive players have to be way better. Like, if they defend like they did these first two games, they can win the series. That's not why they're in the hole that they're in.
Yeah, they've held Dallas to a 114 offensive rating, which is about league average for the season and below Dallas's average. I thought they're like, if you really dig into it, they're not just like blitzing willy-nilly.
No.
They're blitzing pretty selectively. Number one, they'd rather blitz with Gafford as the screener because he's just not on Lively's level as a playmaker. Number two, they'd rather blitz with Cat and Naz Reid because they're not rim protectors anyway, so you might as well blitz and try to get the ball out of Luka's hands. Number three, they'd rather blitz when the Mavs have their worst shooting lineups on the floor around the play. So if Green, Hardy, and Jones are all on the floor, you'll see they amp up their blitzes. And by the way, this is playoff basketball. 11:30 in the second quarter. It's a Luka Lively pick and roll. And they blitz it. And they blitz it because it's Exum, Jones, and Green, I think, around the play. And Exum is on the high wing on the weak side. It's PJ Washington. PJ Washington's in the weak side corner. Normally, the low man would help off PJ Washington. And Minnesota, because they're on it, because it's the freaking conference finals, stays home on PJ Washington. And Mike Conley helps off of Exum, the high man, and comes in and chucks Lively on the roll, hits Lively on the roll. That is intentional. It's smart game planning. It's incredibly good execution. And that's how you blitz. And I thought their blitzes were selective and fine. I thought Rudy was a little lurchy on some of the blitzes and Kyrie got around him, but their defense has more or less been fine. I think the Mavs are leaving a little money on the table with Cat. Anytime they run like a Luka PJ Washington pick and roll, Cat is blitzing and getting all helter skelter. And twice in the first 3 minutes of the game, PJ Washington caught the ball wide open from three. The Wolves are sending a third guy rotating at him from the corner off Kyrie Irving. And the pass is right there staring PJ Washington in the face. And he doesn't make it, and he drives into traffic. And once he lost the ball, another time, I can't remember what happened. He just makes that pass, and all of a sudden, the Wolves are in a world of hurt. Any parting thoughts?
I mean, they limited Dallas's other shooters to 6 for 23 from three in the first two games of the series, like the non-Luka Kyrie 3-point shooters. That's exactly what they would have wanted. If we'd said going into the series, PJ Washington, Derek Jones, all those guys combined to shoot 6 for 23 from three the first two games, you think it's at least 1-1, and it's probably 2-0 Minnesota, right? Because you would have thought that a lot of this is going to come down to not just the 2v2 that we talked about before with the 2 stars on each side, but that you're going to need, a big part of the reason Dallas advanced is because PJ Washington had the Rui Hachimura series from last year, and he hit everything from three in the conference semifinals, which is no criticism at all. Like, that's what happens in the playoffs. Guys have to step up. Same as Caleb Martin last year from Miami, same as Fred VanVleet back in the day against the Bucks. Like, these are the moments you remember in the playoffs, and you would have thought that was going to happen here. So yeah, like, there's certainly things Minnesota will look at and say they could do better defensively, but the reason they're kicking themselves today is because of the offensive mistakes, both specific ones late in the game, and overall, they're just not playing well enough. And so let's see if they can do what they did in Denver, in Dallas, and make this series interesting, because they've certainly spotted themselves a rather large hole the way these first two have gone.
And Dallas is as mentally tough and steely as any team in the last few years. I mean, they're just never out of these games. They just keep playing. They keep trucking. They're totally calm. And I want to shout out before we go to a Boston tangent. I just said his name once. I thought the 8 points that Jaden Hardy gave the Mavs off the bench and one really nice lob dunk assist were huge. They are just begging for one extra guy to give them a little punch. It hasn't been Exum. Tim Hardaway Jr. didn't get in the second half of the game. It's a little thing. I thought those 8 points were like absolutely massive, and then they felt massive at the time.
Jason Kidd has really leaned into Hardy as these playoffs have gone on, and he's given him some huge minutes. I agree. I mean, you have a young guy come in and contribute like that off the bench in a huge spot like that. That's not an easy feat, and he's a guy with certainly some juice off the bounce. Like you said, another guy where it's not only Luka and Kyrie who have to dribble the ball up every time and create something. They could get a tiny bit of a break throughout the game. It's been a fun thing to see for sure.
Before I let you go, we had an NBA Today discussion yesterday. The NBA Today, it's a great title for a show, but it makes talking about the show difficult in time circumstances. NBA Today yesterday, Perk tells the producers, I got a take. And the take is the Celtics are now Jaylen Brown's team. Jaylen Brown is the best player on the Boston Celtics. And the producers tell me this, and I initially recoil because these whose team is it things, the teams hate them because it can foment division within teams and between the best players on teams. And in reality, like, it's both of their teams, it's all of their teams, right? Like, why does it have to be one guy's team and not another guy's team? But I did say to Perk on the show, like, okay, so practically, like with that one season, like 4 or 5 seasons ago, where Jason Tatum in November, December just announced himself as a superstar, like made a leap in the season. It was very clarifying for Boston because he became the guy, which meant the offense ran through him. And so as a practical matter, I asked Perk, does that mean the offense should run through Jaylen Brown now? Is that what you're saying? If he's the best player, if he's the guy, do you reorient the offense so it's more running through Jaylen Brown? And he essentially kind of said, yes, he's the best player on the team. I pushed back, and we'll talk about that. But this is your wheelhouse, a team you follow very closely. Obviously, Tatum has been a little up and down in these playoffs. The three-point shot has not been there. Jaylen Brown played one of the best games of his career in game 2 against the Pacers and has been pretty steady. He was better than Jason Tatum in the finals 2 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. We all know this. I just thought I would open the floor to you for your thoughts on this. And I will say Simmons on his pod yesterday also had a very good discussion about the Tatum discourse and how after game 1, where Tatum is just okay until overtime, when Jaylen Brown gets them to overtime with an incredible shot, and then Tatum scores 10 points and wins the game, that all the angst in the national media around Tatum has really filtered into the Celtics organization, and they've noticed it. And Simmons said this, they don't like it. They think it's not fair. And that's 100% true, that they don't like it and think it's unfair. I want to get this is a team you follow very closely. I just want to get your take on all of this. Jace, all things Tatum, Brown, Perk, whatever you want.
People in Boston are not very happy with me because I'm often, I think, pretty rational about Jason Tatum. And I think I have called him before the NBA's version of a Rorschach test, because you can look at him and you can basically take away from it whatever you want, because he is the prototypical NBA wing in every way. He doesn't really have a single weakness in his game. He has made first team All-NBA each of the last 3 years. I think he at this point has become a little bit in some circles and both overrated and underrated player at the same time, because some people think he should be winning MVP and being the best player on the planet. And other people think Anthony Edwards is better than him when he is not. Jason Tatum is the best player on the Celtics. He is the guy that the Celtics need to get behind for them to win the title. This isn't really up for debate. In these playoffs, he has not hit open jump shots. I was looking at the second spectrum numbers on it before. I mean, I have to dig into it and see just how unlucky he's been. Feels pretty unlucky on these jumpers. He's shooting 26%, I think, from three. Most of the shots have been very open. He starts knocking in some threes. His whole stat line will look a lot different. But look, Jason Tatum is a guy who has been in the spotlight and on a great team from the moment he stepped into the league. And unlike Anthony Edwards and unlike Luka Doncic and unlike Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and unlike any of these Giannis Antetokounmpo or Joel Embiid or even Nikola Jokic, any of these guys, he's come in up here and has been playing in the conference finals and the finals virtually from the moment he stepped foot in the league. I mean, he was a rookie. Now I'm blanking on the highlight of whether he dunked on LeBron or blocked LeBron's dunk in Game 7. But
dunked on LeBron.
He dunked on LeBron in Game 7. That's what I thought. I remember where I was watching that play in Houston ahead of Warriors Rockets Game 7 in 2018. But anyway, so because of that, we've sort of had to, or not had to, we've watched the evolution of Jason Tatum as a player in deep stages of the playoffs at the highest level this whole time. And because of the fact that the Celtics have repeatedly knocked on the door for the past several years, they've made 6 conference finals in 8 years. They've made it to an NBA finals. They sure as hell better make it to another NBA finals based off the way this series is looking right now, where it seems unlikely, or at least doubtful. We'll see. Tyrese Halliburton's questionable to play. Not a great sign. He left the game the other day with a hamstring injury. I think because the Celtics have repeatedly banged on the door and not gotten in and have been waiting to win a title and have had a great team over and over again, I think because Jason Tatum is clearly the best player on the team, which is no disrespect to Jaylen Brown, who's a fantastic player and a deserved All-Star this year and was a deserved borderline All-NBA candidate this year. All of the angst about the fact that the Celtics haven't won all gets put on Jason Tatum, which is what comes with being the best player on the team. And if the Celtics can win another 6 games and win an NBA championship, then all of the angst and all the drama and all the questions about, can the Celtics win in the playoffs and can Jason Tatum deliver in the playoffs and will the Celtics finally get it done? All that stuff will go away. And the Celtics might go on a run where they rip off a few titles over the next few years because they have an awesome team and they are primed to be really good for a long time. And a lot of that is because, you talked about the Tatum and Giannis question before. I don't know if I would pick Jason Tatum ahead of any other player in the league if I was putting together a team. But what I can tell you is if you pick Jason Tatum first, you have probably the most malleable superstar in the league to build around because there isn't a weakness to his game. He's a very good defensive player. He can do everything on both sides of the ball. You could surround him with literally anybody you want in the league. He's the most portable superstar in the league from that standpoint. So, yeah, like I said, I go back to where I was at the beginning. I think he's the NBA's version of a Rorschach test. I think people project onto him whatever they want to project onto him. Like I said, people in Boston have not always been fans of me for pointing out when he has not delivered in the way that he should. But like I said, I also think that he's judged to a different standard than a guy like Anthony Edwards, who's been horrendous on offense the past 5 games. And there's just not really, even now, a whole lot being said about it. Whereas if Jason Tatum shot 30% from the field over 5 games and the Celtics were 2-3 in that stretch, the world would be ending. And it's not for Anthony Edwards, even though they're down 0-2 in the conference finals. So all that is to say that this is the life of being the guy who's on the team that's favored to win the title. The Celtics are very clearly heavy favorites to win the title. They should win another 6 games and win the title. And if they do, the smartest thing our pal Windhorst has ever said is if you win a title, you never have to say you're sorry. And if the Celtics are able to raise banner 18 to the rafters at TD Garden, all this stuff goes out the window, and the duck boats are out in Boston, and everybody's celebrating, and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown both are going to have the numbers in the rafters in the future. So, for all the noise that's going on, I would just say to the Celtics, and I'd say to Jason Tatum, win another 6 games and all will be good.
If they win an 18th title, do we have to start hearing about banner 19 incessantly, or does the banner motif go away with 18?
I would assume the banner motif will continue. That would be my assumption.
So we just are going to live with...
Well, just one other thing about Tatum that I think is very underrated is the guy always plays. Like, especially in the current environment where, and I'm not saying this as a knock, as a ripping anybody, but with how physically demanding the game currently is, the fact that Tatum is always available, always plays heavy minutes, always is out on the court. Like, again, in terms of constructing a team and building a team, having your superstar available all the time is a massive deal. And I do think that part is very much taken for granted for him, that he's just always out there and always playing heavy minutes and always available. Because that's not, if you look around the league, other than Nikola Jokic, those are the 2 guys that no matter what are always out there. Everybody else, it's a little bit questionable.
And that's an important point, and I'm going to come back to that. What I said to Perk yesterday was, I don't really know why we have to do this, why we have to pit them against each other, because
we don't.
The genius
that's why I didn't answer the question, because we don't really have to.
The construction of the Celtics is such that on some nights it's Jason Tatum's quote team, on some nights it's Jaylen Brown's team, on some nights it's Derek White's team, on some nights it's nobody's team, and they all have a bunch of good games. And by the way, Drew Holiday, there's been Drew Holiday's team in this series as much as anybody else.
He's been the best player through the first 2 games of this series. I mean, for as great as Jaylen's shot was, as great as he was in game 2, I mean, Drew Holiday was the best player on the court in game 1. And even though he had 15 and 10, he might have been the best player on the court in game 2, even with Jaylen going crazy.
And what he immediately did, Drew Holiday, in this series was announce to the Pacers, you cannot put Tyrese Halliburton on me. I understand why you want to do it, because you don't want Tyrese Halliburton on Derek White, because all of Boston's best offense involves Derek White pairing up with Tatum and Brown, and we want to take Tyrese out of that. Well, guess what? I'm just going to beat the hell out of you in the post, and you're going to have to put him on Derek White, blah, blah.
One quick aside on Drew Holiday. Obviously, I've watched him for a long time, covered the Bucks when they won the title a couple years ago. The opening night of the season, the Celtics are playing the Knicks, and Drew's obviously making his debut for Boston. And he's guarding Julius Randle, who's one of the strongest players in the league and is an absolute brick wall of a human.
And is mean too, strong and mean at the same time.
And Julius Randle tries to post up Drew Holiday on multiple occasions and bounces off of Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday is an absolute tank. And he might not look like it to fans sitting at home watching, because he's a 6'4" guard and doesn't necessarily stand out that way, that like Shaq or some other 7-footer would, or Joel Embiid. But Drew is an absolute house, and it's just fun when you see that on display in games. It's a pretty fun part of his game to see come out.
So the whole point of the Celtics is that it doesn't have to be anyone's team to the degree that the Mavs are Luka's team or the Nuggets are Jokic's team. It doesn't have to be that. That's
why the Celtics had a plus 11 billion net rating this season and won 64 games and were the best team in the league by a country mile this season.
Because they're deep in top 50 level talent. And B, also, to be fair to Perk, because Jason Tatum is not Nikola Jokic or Luka Doncic or Giannis or Embiid. He's a level below those guys. But I still think he is the best player on the Celtics. And the reason why I don't really think you can tilt, let's say, if you say Jaylen Brown's the guy, and this is Jaylen.
Let's just stop. He is the best player on this.
No. I have a point. I have a point. I promise. I have a point.
I know you have a point. I just think it's we're giving this point a little too much. Not your point.
We're gonna have fun. We're gonna have a little fun with it. We're gonna have a little fun with it.
Okay.
The reason I don't think you can just tilt 20% of ball handling, whatever, from Tatum to Brown in the half court is Jaylen Brown's just not a good enough playmaker for that. He's just not a good enough passer. He has a negative to even assist to turnover ratio every year. And it's very clearly that he's best at finishing a lot of possessions in transition, a lot of possessions in the half court. Initiating, yeah, and he initiated all the time in game 2. Yeah. But the balance is correct. And on Tatum, I think a lot of this is like we can sit here. I heard Chris Ryan say on Bill's pod that Tatum is a lot of this is that Tatum is like the 6th or 7th best player in the NBA and not a top 5 player. We actually sat here and ranked where Jason Tatum is in the NBA. I don't know where your mileage might vary, but I think he just isn't. He isn't on the level of the 4 or 5 best guys. And when you're not on the level of the 4 or 5 best guys, you're going to look inferior in big games compared to those guys at times. So if we ranked it right now, the 4 guys who are clearly above Tatum are Jokic, Giannis, Embiid, and Luka. So right away, the best you can rank them is 5. I think SGA has ascended
he's behind
to a
Shea.
point.
He's behind Shea too, I would say.
So 6 is the ceiling, right?
Yeah.
After that, it's your mileage may vary on what Anthony Davis did this year, what Durant did this year, what Booker did this year, what Steph did.
I would say he's probably ahead of most of those guys. I mean, I'd say it's probably, but whatever the actual number, he's 6 to 8 somewhere.
Yes, with Steph, healthy Kawhi, I think is still a better player than Jason Tatum, but healthy Kawhi only exists for 45 games a year and never exists at the end of it. So just say the average pool of the 100 NBA and I may have left somebody out. And by the way, Wemby is going to be in this discussion very, very soon, if not probably next season. Let's just say you pull 100 executives and you give them that list of players. He comes out like 8th on average or something like that. That's the reality of where Jason Tatum is in the NBA. And that's
Which, by the way, it's way more than okay. It's super awesome.
He's awesome.
A super awesome player.
And by the way, what I said to Perk also is like, Jason Tatum is going to have a game soon. He's had games, but like I don't know what it is about him. This dude put up 50 in a game 7 last year. He put up 40 something in a must-win road game against Milwaukee.
I mean, that's the game I always remember. The Bucks game.
It's the greatest game he's ever played. He single-handedly saved their season on the road.
Him and Al Horford.
After a gut punch loss at home, where Drew Holiday, of all people, closed the game for the Bucks with an insane defensive play. And it looked like their season was going to against a Bucks team without Middleton. Like, this guy has done it in monster moments and not done it enough in some other monster moments.
Right, because he's played in 1,000 playoff games and he's 26 years old. There's 5 guys.
He's also 24 in the finals 2 years ago. 24. Right.
There's 5 guys who have played who played 100 playoff games by their age 26 season. 2 of them are on the Celtics. You could probably guess who they are.
Tatum and
Brown. The other 3 guys are Tony Parker, Kobe Bryant, and Magic Johnson. So that's pretty good company to be in. And we have, again, Anthony Edwards has barely played in the playoffs. He's now having these moments in the playoffs because he's 22 years old. This is what happens. It's okay. It's okay to have failures in the playoffs. The thing about the Celtics group, and for Jason and Jaylen in particular, is their whole careers have been in the conference finals and in the finals. So they've had all these moments where they have come up against it and lost, which is okay. It's all part of the evolution of players, but normally you're doing it in a situation where you're not the favorite or you're not potentially going to win a championship every year. And so you have time to grow into being that level of player. The Celtics have been growing. These 2 guys have been growing into those levels of players while playing for those things, which really outside of, in particular, Magic and Tony Parker, like, because Kobe, it took a couple of years for them to really ramp up before Shaq got there. You just don't see guys that age playing in the finals and conference finals every year. And I think that's most of where this comes from because they've knocked on the door a bunch and not broken through. And if they do break through over the next month, which I think they're going to because they should win, then all this stuff goes away and the whole conversation changes. And then the conversation will immediately shift to, well, can they win 5 championships? Because that's how these things go.
There are 2 discussion points that we should all just put in the vault, lock the vault. Maybe don't mention them for a little while. Number 1 is anything Jordan. Just like, let's chill on Jordan.
Yes,
let's put Jordan in the vault. Number 2 is the D word, dynasty. Let's just table that one until a team wins 2 championships in 3 years. How about let's put it, mothball it for a little while. By the way, we should have in the player rankings who's around Tatum. Jalen Brunson has earned a mention as well, and some people would mention Donovan Mitchell. I will say this though, I've seen a couple of people, including I've seen a couple of people argue and or vote Jalen Brunson first team All NBA over Luka. I think that is like absolute insanity for what happened this year. Like, Luka is a first team All NBA player. I think I saw a couple people argue for that. If you want to put Brunson over Tatum, that's one thing. Luka's first team All NBA. Last thing, Boston. I agree with you. This is now at the point where I use the word have to win the title. I'm reluctant to go there because
they have to win the title. They're a 64-win team that was an 11 plus 11 net rating. They have to win. They have to win the title. This is their opportunity. Now, again, if they have injuries or something, that's different. But assuming Porzingis is back here in the next few days, which hopefully he is for their standpoint, the Celtics need to get this done. This is their opportunity. They got to take advantage of it.
Well, so I was going to say I use have to, like that ironclad, a little reluctantly, just because we just spent this entire podcast talking about how awesome Dallas is and how awesome Luka and Kyrie are.
And Dallas is awesome. And if Luka and Kyrie win, then, I mean, it's going to be one of the remarkable runs. But this is the Celtics' opportunity. You have to take advantage of this opportunity with this team, with the way the path opened, with Denver being out of the way, who I thought was the one team they were never going to beat, in my mind at least. It's all sitting there for them to get over the line and get it done.
Minnesota's also awesome, and Porzingis is injured with an uncertain return date.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon, maybe game 4 is what's reported. We'll see how he looks. All of that said, it's pretty goddamn close to have to win the title for me because the path, everything you just said. I mean, this is a bye to the NBA Finals. If Tyrese Halliburton can't go or is limited in the rest of this series, it's not even that the teams that they've played have been decimated by injuries. It's they didn't have to face Philly. Giannis didn't play in the playoffs. Like this, they will never have an easier path to the finals than this ever.
Yeah, the entire East has been hurt. The Sixers had Joel's injury, even though he made it back just before the playoffs. The Bucks had a ton of injuries. The Knicks had a ton of injuries, and the 3 teams they've played, Cleveland, Indiana, and Miami, have all their best players get hurt.
And that's half the battle of winning a title is the luck breaking your
100%.
way in your conference so that you get to the finals. That's why the odds have been on Boston's side the whole time because their path is so much easier. And
winning
then,
a
like
championship
you said,
requires a ton of luck and a ton of talent. The Celtics have a ton of talent, and they've also gotten lucky, and that's okay. Like that's not a criticism. And the idea that their title will matter less if
I don't even want to go there.
No, but I'm just saying it doesn't. That's why Windhorst line is it's the smartest thing he's ever said. You win a title, that's what people remember, is that you hang the banner and you win the title. The rest of it doesn't matter.
And so you have this path. They should get there. Let's assume they get there for the sake of argument. And you get Dallas or Minnesota. Teams you didn't expect to be there maybe before the season. And the team that you did expect to be there, to your point, the team that beat you twice in the regular season in games that felt like finals games with the best player in the world, is out. As good as Dallas and Minnesota are, you better win if you're the Celtics because this is the path. You can beat both of those teams, and just imagine if they get to the finals and lose to the Mavericks or lose to the Wolves. The level of heartbreak that would be for Boston, that would be an all-time painful finals loss, given how close they've been, given that they had a chance against the Warriors 2 years ago, up 2-1, didn't do it. Given that they inexplicably fell behind 3-0 to the Heat in the conference finals last year, didn't even get to the finals. Credit to the Heat.
And all of that history is why they have to win. They've been
the
knocking on the door. Yes, and they could have won. They could have won the Golden State series if Andrew Wiggins doesn't become Moses Malone for a couple games. It's
the finances going forward.
Yes,
if Tatum re-signs on the super duper max, at some point this becomes maybe financially not viable, and it might be in a couple of years. Like this is getting pretty close to like it's rare that you get a team that has never won before. That was not an overwhelming favorite. I think Boston was an overwhelming favorite in the East, but I just kept hearing people say Denver. I picked Boston to win the title the whole year, but I understand the Denver fear. Like that just has to win, but we're getting there for Boston. But we have a long way to go. Tim Bontemps, you're going to be at Game 3 in Indiana tonight. Unclear if Tyrese Halliburton will be playing in that game. Fingers crossed he's feeling better. Indiana has put up a nice fight, but they're undermanned. They haven't lost at home yet in the playoffs. I think that streak will probably come to an end in one of these next two games. And then we'll see if Minnesota can rebound. Thank you very much for joining this morning. I wanted to talk about that game, and I'm glad we had a chance to do it. Tim Bontemps, you can hear him on the Hoop Collective minimum twice a week, right? Sometimes 3 times a week.
2.5 times.
2.5 times a week, and he's covering the playoffs like no other. Thank you, sir.
No problem. Thank you.